Hi, this is Lex, and welcome to the Fintech Blueprint. It's your podcast about fintech, decentralized finance, digital banking, investing, robo-advice, artificial intelligence, and all the other frontier technology that is transforming financial services. To get more content, like an illustrated transcript of this conversation in your inbox, subscribe at fintechblueprint.com. So without further delay, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's conversation. I'm thrilled to have with us Hristo Borisov, who is the co-founder and CEO at Payhawk, a really interesting fintech company that automates the financial function of businesses and helps them figure out spend and other bits and pieces of the financial platforms that they use. So with that, Hristo, welcome to the podcast today.
Hello, Lex. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to be able to share some insights with your audience today.
I'd love to talk about how you became a founder and how you got into technology. So maybe help us understand a little bit about your earlier background, kind of what was your education focus on, and what were some of your foundational experiences in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Bulgaria. And one of the, I would say the most forming experience for me has been my university education, where I studied computer science and also did a double degree in business administration. I was pretty much in love with computers since I was like 13, 14 years old. And as soon as I got my computer in 2001, that was kind of a modern computer, I was able to really connect to the internet and discover this whole new world. And then I was very passionate about doing things on my own in terms of, web programming and, playing with tools. But it wasn't until when I went to the university, I started like kind of professionally investing time to improve my skills in terms of how to code and so on. And during my sophomore year, I managed to win a competition, which was programming competition. I was actually on third place, but I managed to get to a job interview to a company called LendIt at the time, which was about, I think, 70 employees in 2007. And this became to be one of the most successful tech companies in Bulgaria and became really fundamental for the whole Bulgarian ecosystem. Out of this company, we have now more than 65 companies that span out, and a lot of entrepreneurs came from this background. And we joke with it that this is kind of the PayPal mafia for the Bulgaria. We call it the LendIt mafia. So I joined this company in 2007 and spent 4 years as an engineer there. Then moved to be the first product managers in the company, and managed to do a lot of and implemented a lot of the, so to say, lean startup practices and, incubate a lot of new products and services within LendIt from 2011 till the acquisition by a public US company called Progress Software in 2014. So those initial 7 years, moving from being an engineer to more of a product manager and trying to bootstrap a lot of products internally at the company, were really fundamental for this specific, skill set.
Why do you think this company was so successful at being a launchpad for entrepreneurs? Like, what was it about it that you said over 50 companies were spun out of it and there was this acquisition? What was in the culture or what was in the setup of this effort that created such an interesting outcome?
Yeah, I think for LendIt, that was later acquired by Progress, the main drive was that we did not have an amazing other really big successful tech company at that scale. And LendIt managed to find a really good niche, building a product for developers, helping them build their mobile apps, web apps, desktop apps. And we became the number one in the world in what we were doing at the time. And there was a lot of pride, being able to really build this company from Bulgaria in the DNA of the company. And we were also, this was a company that really made it possible for us to compete on a global scene with really large companies. Like, we were competing for some products with Microsoft, with Google, and a lot of other tools that were on the market that were based in the US, Russia, Denmark, and so on. And we really managed to see at the time that building a successful product is not only about having the DNA as an engineer and building the product itself, but being able to really create a good service around this product, to really service well the customers, to create a good enough product market strategy, to have a strong go-to-market team. And those things were very unique. You were not able to really see these things in any other company in Bulgaria. And I think that gave the confidence to a lot of people in the company that you can truly create global companies out of Bulgaria, even though we don't have a massive domestic markets. We're well suited as a country to build great engineers and to help them realize their ideas by building products that are, so to say, exported.
The parts that where you competed with Google and Microsoft, that was on the cloud platform?
Yes, that was on building developer tools. So we had products that were focused at helping developers build their products, in the cloud. We had very early on BaaS product, which was backend as a service. At the time, we have a platform for helping you build mobile application and having the full stack management of, from building to testing to deployment and delivery of your product in the cloud. We also had a lot of programming UIs that were allowing you to create, cross-platform mobile apps with the product that we used to have, which I think still on the market, called Native Script, and having other UI components that were leading at the time on the market. So all of those things were, very developer focused, and pretty much, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, those were emerged as the top names really servicing developers. And on some of those products, we had a very, very competitive offerings and great products that still exist today. And in building these products, we were really able to see that, hey, you can really go and create something that doesn't have to be created in Silicon Valley to be able to be a successful product.
I'm trying to get at this idea about what's a product and then what is a platform, and what's the difference between building a platform and an application. And in particular, you've also mentioned the words full stack, you've mentioned the word developer tools. I'm trying to lay the foundation because I think it plugs into also how one sells and builds for financial services and for businesses. But can you talk about what's the difference between trying to build a platform versus a point solution? And then how do you think about building for a customer segment like developers, which is you're in this kind of enabling motion, right, for helping people make things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, there is the so-called platform trap. This is a common notion that, people don't go and build platforms from day one. The platform is something that might emerge and can be a combination of, multiple problems that you solve for a customer that allows them to really step on you, so that you can be considered as a platform. And I think the key characteristic of a platform is that A, it needs to solve, a variety of problems for customers. B, they should be able to really be able to build things on top of it so that they can use it as a platform or as a base to be able to, whether it is a marketplace, whether it is an extension and APIs that people can build third-party apps on it, or whether there is an ability for you to really also build code on it. So the so-called low-code environment where you can actually have a lot of extensibility that is actually logic living within the system. I think people shouldn't build platforms from day one, and I don't think any of the successful platforms that do exist today started as a platform. I think platform is the evolution of the life cycle of a product when it matures enough and is able to create its own gravity to become a platform. But at the end of the day, every product should start with a very specific problem that it solves for customers. And to answer your second part of the question, what it is like to build for developers, I think one of the most amazing things to be able to build products that are used by developers, because at the end of the day, you need to be one layer deeper than a normal application layer. You really need to think at what are the tools and what are the capabilities and what are the use cases that they could or they can come up with on top of your platform. I think one thing that is a little bit, to me at least, less rewarding than building a direct product that is being used by end users is that you have the ability with end users to really see the last mile experience for the customer, where the customer is really delighted, where they're using it for a certain use case, and you can really get things very well done, and you can experience, the actual end result. While with building developer tools, you are, at the end of the day, something that people step on top of. And even though your direct customers and indirect users are the developers, still what they're trying to achieve is building for somebody else. And you might have an amazing applications that are built on top of your platform, but at the end of the day, you're not interacting with these end users, which, so to say, live, this is changing. You're only working with the developers. And I think that's quite a different mentality. Luckily, with Payhawk, we also have a layer and a quite a deep API that we are currently having as part of our long-term strategy. And I think this is exactly where we are getting back to our roots, being able to really serve developers well, to let them, finance teams build a lot of extensions and customize a lot of things on our platform or our product so far, so that they can achieve what they need. So I think maybe as a final note on this question, I don't believe there is going to be any product today that is going to be successful without having very structured APIs and developer interfaces, so that you can actually extend and plug in within those systems in the next 5 years. I think we are getting to a world where everything is developer centric, everything is focused on integrations, and you just cannot get away on the market without having a very strong API layer.
Yeah, I mean, it's the equivalent of just being literate in the current time, the ability to connect to things through the right programmable interfaces and to structure code that's streaming rather than static. I think you've put in place an interesting architecture of building a local company that's able to go global, and that's able to do it by focusing on kind of like this economic primitive of a developer that's building often a company or features. And as you solve particular problems, you expand to being a platform from being a single particular product. Before we step to financial services and Payhawk, let's talk about that kind of systemic approach, but then applying it to the experiment of artificial intelligence and natural language processing. So part of your experience was to try to build a system that generates chatbots, if I understand right. Can you talk about that and sort of what that was like, how it was motivated, and then where did it go?
Yeah, this was one of the products that we incubated back at Progress, initially codenamed Darwin AI, and later on named Progress Native Chat. So for this specific product, we do have a pending patent in the US for what we call cognitive flow. And our idea was that at the time, that is 2017, a lot of the chatbots that were created, there was this dialogue flow coming out of Google, and there was with AI, later on acquired by Facebook. The big premise was that you have to go and train the chatbots in a specific decision tree. So you had to explain, hey, this is the chatbot. Yes, it can have natural language processing, and it can understand some context and draw that, bring back specific, structured data in the form of objects, so that you can go and, try to use this context within a conversation. But our idea was different. Our idea was to say, well, if you have to go and predefine every conversation this chatbot might have, that might make it very script-based and pretty much an IVR.
What's the word that you just used, IVR?
IVR is interactive voice recording. So this is when somebody says, okay, if you want to speak to a person, click 1. If you want to, file a complaint, feel 2, and so on. So that's an IVR technology. So this is kind of just an example of a decision tree where you have to go through this specific process. And our idea was that a chatbot needs to be trained on the different conversation it can have and the different context that the chatbot can have. So, for example, if you think about a chatbot that you can use for booking an appointment, let's say a chatbot that is booking an appointment with doctors in a hospital. So what the chatbot needs to know as a context is what are the doctors in the hospital, what are the available timeframes for the doctors, what are the different types of meetings we can book or appointments we can book with a specific doctor, and which doctor is for specific, for what purpose. But that's it. You don't have to train the chatbot on exactly how it needs to have the conversation. And what we built as a technology is we created a pretty much a JSON definition, a structured data on the different ways a chatbot can converse, including structured data on who are the doctors, what are the timeframes, and so on. And we didn't have to predefine every specific conversation from the day. So we said a chatbot can do, let's say, 5 conversations. It can help you book an appointment. It can help you cancel an appointment. It can help you get to speak to a person and maybe remind you about an appointment, right? And that's it. We didn't predefine how you are going to have these conversations. And as soon as somebody starts to have a conversation with the chatbot, it figures out based on the context and the NLP, what is the context, and then starts immediately having the conversation with you. So that was kind of the innovation we brought to the market. And that was something that obviously was, and it's still targeted to developers willing to build chatbots. And in its early days, our idea was that we would like to really create something that allows the developers to really use existing systems that are in place, so that the existing structured data on what is a doctor, what are the available timeframes, and all of these data can be reused in a conversational UI. So instead of you building, let's say, a web interface where you need to go and define this data, you can use your existing data and plug it in a conversational UI so that these things can happen much faster for you. And obviously now looking at ChatGPT, you can just see how much things can get to the extreme of how well this could be done. So yeah, we were glad at the time of what we were able to achieve. There is so much potential with this product as we saw from Microsoft.
It's one of these things where you don't know if you're at the local maximum or if you're in the global maximum for some particular technology. Like the AI waves keep coming, and every time they peak, it feels like this is as good as it's going to get. And then, it stagnates for a few years, and then you have another crazy peak. So I remember there were a lot of financial chatbots that were coming out. Like there was Plum, and then there was others that would be integrated into bank systems and that would consume a lot of the internal data, be able to answer questions. I owned one back in 2012 that was like a Q&A chatbot you'd integrate into bank sites. But then, of course, like that is just such primitive stuff compared to the OpenAI model, which has ingested the entire internet and is now having emotionally damaging conversations with New York Times reporters.
Maybe one of the interesting things that I always refer back to the Gartner hype cycle. You have this kind of a innovation breakthrough that really rises the expectation. If you look back at 2017, everybody was saying, well, now everything is going to be chatbots. Facebook started building chatbots within the chat itself. Everybody was talking about chatbots. You go to a website, there is always a chatbot. But then there is the realization that this specifically breakthrough cannot solve every single problem. And then there is this plateau and actually slope of alignment where you are actually realizing for the practical uses of this innovation and that the specific things this is going to help you instead of thinking that, hey, now that we have ChatGPT, we need to go and throw everything else and just use that, right? It's going to take some time until we realize exactly the specific use. And I think having Microsoft, in this case, pushing it as a replacement of the general search is an interesting idea. But I think at the end of the day, it is going to fall to a specific need that's not going to be that generic at the end of the day. That is going to fully replace, let's say, the search engine concept.
So in this kind of second version of the story, you're building systems for kind of integrating these automated conversational machines into other businesses or other systems that developers have built. Let's switch over now to Payhawk. And let's formally define what is Payhawk. Like, tell us about the company, tell us how much money you've raised, what it's for, and kind of the main functions. And then a little bit about its history, kind of how did the idea come to you?
So Payhawk is a spend management platform. We help businesses manage their expenses, and in a way where we issue company cards, help businesses manage invoices and bill payments in 32 countries. So we issue debit and credit cards in certain markets. We recently launched in the US a few months ago. We're able to provide our services usually to any kind of businesses that are above 50 employees, which is our target. We have direct integration with the ERP systems of our customers so that their finance team have a full reconciliation of their payments from the moment they issue a company card to the moment they control all the spend on these cards and how employees can use these cards to the moment we are collecting all the receipts and invoices and reconciling them in the financial system of the customer. The idea came in 2018. When we left Progress, my idea was to be very strategic about the next business we were going to build. I was, looking to build a big company, and to build a big company, you need to look for a big problem in a big market. And we started with one idea, which was pretty much building a virtual card for companies that protects the businesses from overspending money on subscriptions. And by spending about a month and a half talking to about 40 CFOs, every time I was speaking to them about this virtual card that is protecting them from overspending money on subscriptions, we realized that every one of them is asking us about physical cards. And then we started looking in the space about physical cards, and we quickly understood that managing physical cards and spend on cards is pretty dramatic things for finance teams, because first of all, you don't have a lot of control on these cards, on how they're going to be used. Then these cards are creating a lot of transactions that you need to chase the receipts. And if you don't have a system in place, this can quickly become a nightmare for the finance team. And we also spent time to identify other pain points for the businesses. And we quickly realized that also, sometimes if it's a very large business, they don't want to go and issue cards to every single employee. They would like to be able to have just a classical expense management, but they would like to reimburse the employees directly from the platform. Or if they're working with suppliers that they don't accept cards, to be able to manage their accounts payable, get an invoice and pay this invoice directly from our platform. This is where we, for example, built an integration and OCR that reads data from invoices in 62 languages today. Our idea came from the fact that in my experience before, I was managing a budget and it was really, really painful to spend anything from that budget. And especially if the vendor was requiring for you to pay with a card, you had to go through procurement, then accounting, approvals, and it was very painful until somebody from finance, is able to go to this website and to make a payment. And we figured out that there needs to be a better way, and this is where the idea came. And over the last 4.5 years, we have raised $240 million for this idea. We currently have teams in 9 countries. We have about 270 employees today, and we are servicing thousands of customers globally with the ability for them to use our company cards, being able to put real-time spend controls on these cards so that the finance team is in control about who can spend what. And they can, get all the data they have from those invoices and payments and fully reconcile them to systems like Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, Xero, QuickBooks, and many others that we currently support as native integrations.
Who were some of the early customers? How did you go and find the early customers and their pain points?
I think that is kind of what we think is a really big secret sauce for us. Because when we look at any market, the first thing is, can we deeply understand the customer problem? Not what the customer is telling you, but to have a deep understanding of the challenges he goes through so that you can actually identify the root cause and to actually identify a solution that is going to be exactly what the customer needs. And in our specific case, we were very methodical about building a series of iterations where we were doing a lot of validation and prototypes and validating this with customers to ensure we really deeply understand their problem. And in this specific case, building a product for finance professionals, you need to do a huge amount of work with them to really get down to the level of information and details they need to ensure that you're actually solving a big problem for them. So I think for us, being customer driven and customer centric has been a big part of our DNA. One of our company values is that everybody is customer success. Everybody should be able to really help a customer. And I think we managed to funnel a lot of this valuable feedback that we receive from the market, not only what they need today, but what they're looking to do into our engineering roadmaps so that we can actually deliver on them.
I want to push a little bit more about the profile of the customers, like how big or small are they, like how do you engage with them, like how do you go to market? And I wonder if there's any continuity between how you had previously thought about building for developers and enabling developers.
Obviously, being for developers is a very different process. We had a lot of, so to say, product-led growth because the developer is coming to buy the product, and developers sometimes don't want to speak to salespeople or customer success people. They just want to see the product, test the product themselves, do their own evaluation of the product, and then decide whether to buy or not, which is completely different when you're selling to the office of the CFO. When you're selling to the office of the CFO, usually the customers we sell to are mid-sized enterprises, which we define as companies that are between 100 and 1,000 employees. They're the very typical customer of Payhawk, because as soon as you cross 50, 60 employees, this is where things start to break. This is where you need a lot more flexibility in terms of the business, in terms of how you spend money, who spends money, and how you spend those money. And this is where the finance teams become a lot more mature. Before that, you might have one or two people dealing with the finance team, with the whole function. But when you cross 100 employees, things accelerate and escalate in terms of complexity. And then when you cross 200 employees, you start talking about an ERP system. When you start going international, you start talking about ERP systems that are supporting multiple markets, so that you have a consolidated statements and you can manage kind of a group. In our case, what we do is we do a lot of consultative selling. So we try to be as valuable to the customer in terms of, here is the product that we have. Here are the challenges that customers solve with us. Here is how customers usually solve these challenges and how we have seen that being approached. And pros and cons of these different approaches are such and such. So we try to be pretty much partnering with the businesses rather than going and botting on, and here is a product, this is the demo, you figure out the demo and you either buy or not buy. So our go-to-market is focused on being very local. So currently we have offices in many places in Europe. So we have a team in Barcelona, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, London, our team in New York as well. For all these locations, we try to have a local team that is able, from a selling perspective and from a customer success perspective, being able to natively serve the customer, to understand the local ERP systems and the local integrations that are necessary, to understand the different challenges that those companies go through in each market, and to be able to really give them a solution that is going to be scalable and help them grow as their business scales.
Let's talk about some of those integrations. Like, how standardized or how different are all these systems, and how much resourcing do you have to put in place to hit interoperability across different geographies and different ERP systems and all of that?
Luckily, serving companies between 100 and 1,000 in US and Europe, there is a lot of commonality on the systems they use. There is some localization in place that is needed. Obviously, the language is one thing and the support, but also some product features. For example, Germany is very notorious for per diem and how they're managing their travel expenses versus any other region. So there is a fair bit of localization that is needed, but we're happy with keeping the product at about 95% the same across markets, so that customers can really know what to expect when they add more businesses to it.
When you were starting to, develop the software, and I want to take us back to that question of product versus platform, today you've expanded out into lots of adjacent features. Was it always an intention to build this broad platform, this financial ecosystem for the CFO? If it wasn't, which I'm guessing it wasn't, how did it sequence so that everything fits together and is value add? Another way to get at the same question is, are there things that you thought this target customer would want, but then once you actually try to bring it to market, it ended up not working? How did you collect together the feature set, which is quite broad?
I think, first of all, yes, there were features that we brought to market that we thought that the customer needs, but they didn't need that much. And so, for example, our first feature that we were thinking is going to be killer feature was the subscription management. And we ended up building the company around this from day one. After initial 45 days of the company, we realized that that's not going to be a great feature. And we launched this feature 3.5 years later. So we took really our time. We did a pivot. Obviously, we decided that's not going to be just virtual cards and subscriptions. We're going to focus on other things. And then once we mature, then we're going to do the subscriptions. And that was one example, but specifically, it was very intentional for us that we are going to build this broad platform, because this is what we identified very early on, that the struggle for the finance team is that they're currently using one thing for expense management, another thing for company cars, third thing for approval of invoices and purchase ordering and accounts payable, another thing for exchanging money. And we saw by speaking to a lot of CFOs that the the finance team is not a super tech savvy. At the end of the day, they are forced today to use multiple systems and to try to integrate them today into one single system. And especially for those companies that go to multiple markets, that is even becoming a bigger problem, because some of those tools that they currently use in one market does not translate to another market. And then this quickly becomes from 4 tools to 10, 12, 13 tools they need to integrate together in the finance function. And this is exactly the problem we are looking to solve. We are looking to really build in the next 10 years a truly global platform that can work with every currency in the world, with every payment method that you need, fully consolidated and integrated, so that you can actually have your dashboard for your global businesses without having to go and having to work with a local bank in every single market to provide cards, for example. You can just have a global platform that does that for you. And even though that was intentional, that is a vision that is going to take 5 to 10 years to realize that its full potential. Because there are, the finance market is such a fragmented market because of regulation, compliance, politics, and many other reasons, and currencies, of course. It will take a while before we are able to achieve our vision. But we can definitely see with every new country and every new currency we're adding on the platform, how well this is accelerating the roadmap. And just recently, we launched the US as a full credit card in the US. And currently, we even haven't started onboarding net new customers on it. We are currently even onboarding just the existing customers that are based in Europe that do have subsidiaries in the US, because the demand for that is so big. And we're really glad to see that as soon as we open these new capabilities and customers are able to use a single platform across Europe and US that they were not able to use before, they immediately utilize that. And, there are many other regions in the world where we have a potential to expand. And this has been a deliberate thing, but it was a very, very intentional from the early days that is how we are going to differentiate. And because of our very strong engineering product DNA, we believe we have the technical capacity to really pull this off.
Let's look for a second into the future and into the competitive dynamics of the space that you're in. I have a couple of ideas and just wanted to run them by you. So one question and idea is, business model evolution. So I know that similarly situated companies, they start in the software as a service space and then find a lot of profitability in adding financial services into the mix. So adding kind of like underwriting returns, whether it's on the cards themselves or whether it's through working capital loans, because you have this big business database and you have a view of all their expense management, you might have a sense of, which are good risks and not. So one question is like, what's your view on, and have you thought about the adjacency of the software product and the underlying financial product, and is there opportunity there? And then number two is, if you look at the competitive set, also, how do you think about growth? If it's a global opportunity, like, are you bumping up against Brex and other card providers, or, is it a regional opportunity? And I think that for me, I tie the two questions together, right? Because you can have horizontal market share and then you can have vertical integration. I'm curious how you think about that.
Well, I think on the first one, on the business model, the more you mature your product and the larger customers you serve, the more there is potential for you to expand the capabilities and the ways you make money. So, for example, as soon as you start working with businesses that have entities in multiple countries, those are businesses that immediately are exposed to a lot of, let's say, FX opportunities, where they are obviously exchanging money, they're paying in different currencies. you have also those customers that are, for example, using your product for a lot of, let's say, bill payments and accounts payable management. As soon as you go and work with those international customers, there is a bigger opportunity for you to do cross-border payments and to really support more of that. There is obviously, as you move across regions, there are markets that do prefer to be credit first versus debit. That brings, higher interchange in these specific markets. There is also the ability to expand your portfolio in terms of capabilities that you do and include things like payroll and other things. So each of those offers an innovation on the business model and on the FX and interchange. Obviously, as you become regulated, you also have the opportunity to earn money on the safeguarded funds and on the interest rate there, which is especially relevant these days as these interest rates are booming. But on the other side, are making, let's say, less compelling to have a very big exposed credit model. So there are a lot of dynamics to the business model. And, as you're able to serve larger and larger customer base, there is more and more opportunity for you to differentiate your model. For us, a core thing has always been that regardless of the financial services that we can offer, we think ourselves as a software first company. Because the opportunity with software is that at the end of the day, the gross profit margin or the profit margins for this business are very, very high, being a software. When it comes to financial services, even though you can go and expand, you always have a lot of costs associated with that. You cannot have a financial services model that has that can nearly match the gross profit you can find from a software business. And our model has always been focused on having at least 50% of our revenue focused on SaaS, because at the end of the day, this is where you are solving a core problem for the customer. And if you're able to maintain this at 50%, it means you are solving a big enough problem for the customers. And if customers are not willing to give you so much money on SaaS, it means you're not innovating enough, and it means you are not be able to be competitive enough. And I think that's actually the answer to your second question. What is our competition and how we look at that? This is exactly how we look at it, by making sure that we consider and judge ourselves and measure everything in terms of MRR, how much money we make from software. Because the financial element in financial services revenue is one that depends on the economy, depends on the vendors, it depends on the infrastructure setup that you have. But the one that is fully in your control is really the SaaS. And that's why that's the leading indicator and the North Star for us, being able to really do that. And you can see some companies like Brex and Ramp and others in the US trying to switch that model and move from having 90+% revenue from interchange, trying to push more services, try to become more of a software product. And that's actually hard, because you have been selling a product with, at the end of the day, you have been selling a financial product that comes with a huge amount of cash back, and the customers are buying it for a very different reason. And as soon as you start selling them software, many things in your company needs to change. From the way you prospect, from the way you sell, to the way you serve those customers. And I think this is something that we are very focused on, to ensure that the level of SaaS, features and capabilities and problems we solve for the customer continues to increase in terms of complexity. And
a lot of that rings true for me. In tracking the industry, it's been kind of confusing to see fintech at the same time referring to software that's used in the making of the financial product that companies access, i.e. the loans and the underwriting and the trading of them and so on. And then separately and distinctly, the software that is built for the financial function. And I feel like we're just starting to create connective tissue between those two different themes. But I think you make really good points about the economics and the incentives and how they really are very different profiles of economic activity, and that being clear about what it is that you're doing is important and helpful. If our audience wants to learn more about either you or about Payhawk, where should they go? How can they learn more about the company and its activities?
Payhawk.com is the best place where they can, sign up for a demo or explore the product themselves. There is a lot of resources that we have there. People can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Hristo Borisov, which is easy way to get in touch as well.
Fantastic. Hristo, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, that's it for this week's episode of the Fintech Blueprint. For more technical deep dives into all things fintech and decentralized finance, check out fintechblueprint.com and grab a free subscription to the newsletter. This is Lex, and I'll see you next time.